Scaling process. Scaling process is a process of assigning number of particular symbol to a number of future objects. Its purpose is studying characteristic of the symbol. In social science research, measuring tools used to measure variable is often not available, so it must be designed and developed by researchers themselves. The measuring instrument used in research is called a research instrument. Researchers must be able to distinguish unit observation in accordance with characteristic observed using this technique certain scaling that already explained at the beginning of this video. In a non-comparative scaling technique, respondents use the standard appropriate judgment for them. They are not trying to compare objects that are valued with other objects or certain standards. Respondent only evaluating object at a time. Because of this, non-comparative scale often referred as monadic scale. The non-comparative scale has two techniques in the process, namely continuous rating scale and detailed ranking scale. The first is continuous rating scale. On a continuous rating scale, respondents are asked to place a mark at the appropriate position on the line that runs from an assessment variable to another variable valuation. Thus, respondents are not restricted with certain criteria as in the comparative scaling technique. After the respondent gives assessment, the researchers divide the line into as many categories as desired and assign scores based on the category. Thus, the assessment of this technique has the characteristic of description and order. The advantage of this scaling technique is easy to construct, but this technique also has weakness. The weakness is complexity unless it has been influenced computerized. The next is detailed ranking scale. Respondents are given a scale that has a number of a brief description related to each category. Categories are organized according to scale position. On this technique, respondents are asked to rate categories based on the most described the object being assessed. Detailed ranking scale technique include Likert scale, semantic differential scale, and staple scale. Likert scale is a self-report technique for measuring attitude where subjects are asked to indicate their level of agreement or disagreement with each statement. Next, semantic differential scale. This technique is based on the assumption that an object has a number of dimensions of connotative understanding that can be placed in range of feature multidimensional, which is called semantic space. To be able to construct a continuous rating scale, we must make 6 decisions. Those decisions are number of categories, balanced scale or unbalanced scale, odd or even number of categories, forced or involuntary choice, and nature and level of verbal description, and the last, physical form or configuration. Next is multi-item scale. Multi-item scale consisting of several questions for single statement for evaluation. Likert scale, differential semantic, and staple scale previously presented to measure attitude toward an item under study is example of a multi-item scale. The measurement process uses a measuring instrument. The measuring instrument must produce a size that matches the characteristic of real objects. In general, there are 3 characteristics that are used to assess whether or not the measurement process. It is validity, reliability, and practicality.
Questionnaires and observation forms. Questionnaires are structured techniques for data collection consisting of a series of questions, written or oral, which are answered by respondent. Objectives of a questionnaire. First, he must translate the information needed into specific questions that can and will be answered by respondent. Second, the questionnaire must raise, motivate, and encourage respondents to engage in interviews, to work together, and complete interviews. Third, the questionnaire must minimize response error. Questionnaire design process. The steps in the questionnaire are specify the information needed, specify the type of interview method, determine the content of individual questions, design questions to overcome respondents' inability and unwillingness to answer, decide on the structure of the question, determine the wording of the question, arrange the questions in the correct order, form and layout identification, reproduce the questionnaire, and eliminate bugs by testing. Specify the information needed. It will be helpful to review the problem, components, and approach, especially the research questions, hypotheses, and information needed. Type of interviewing method: personal interview, telephone interview, letter questionnaire, computer-assisted interviews, CIPI, and CITI, and internet questionnaire. Individual question content. Is the question necessary? Each question in the questionnaire must contribute to the information needed or serve a specific purpose. Are several questions needed instead of one? After answering that a question is needed, we must ensure that it is enough to get the desired information. Overcoming inability to answer. Is the respondent informed? Filter questions that measure familiarity, product usage, and past experience must be asked before questions about the topic itself. Can the respondent remember? Making mistakes occur when the respondent remembers, and even that did not actually occur. Can the respondent articulate? If respondents cannot articulate their response to a question, they tend to ignore the question and may refuse to respond to the rest. Overcoming unwillingness to answer. Effort required the respondents. Most respondents did not want to devote much effort to provide information. The researcher can provide a list of the parts and ask respondents to check those that apply. Context. Respondents didn't want to respond to questions they considered inappropriate for the given context. Legitimate purpose. Explaining why data is needed can make requests for such information appear valid and increase respondents' willingness to answer. Sensitive information. Respondents don't want to disclose, at least accurately, sensitive information because this can embrace or threaten the respondent's prestige or self-image. Increasing the willingness of respondent. Place a sensitive topic at the end of the questionnaire. Prefer questions with interesting statements of behavior are common. Ask questions using third-person techniques. Hide the questions in the group if there are other questions that the respondent is willing to answer. Give a categorical response instead of asking of specific numbers. Use random techniques. Choosing question structure. Unstructured question. It is an open question answered by respondents in their own words. Structured question. Questions that determine alternatives, sets of response, and response formats.
Number 3. Choosing question wording. Question words are translations of the contents and structure of the desired questions into words that can be understood by respondents easily and clearly. If a question is said poorly, the respondents can refuse to answer it or maybe answer it incorrectly. There are 8 guidelines. There are: first, defining the problem. Second, use ordinary words. Third, use unambiguous words. 4, avoid the main question. 5, avoid implicit alternatives. 6, avoid implicit assumption. 7, avoid generalization and estimates. And 8, use positive and negative statements. Next, determine sequence of questions. There are opening questions, type of information, difficult questions, effect on next questions, and logical order. In type of information, the type of information obtained in the questionnaire can be classified as first, basic information, second, classification information, and third, identification information. Next, pretest. Pretesting or pretest refers to testing a questionnaire on a small sample of respondents to identify and eliminate potential problems. Pretest is best done with a personal interview, even if the actual survey must be done by letter, telephone, or electronic means, because the interviewer can observe the respondent's attitude. Next, reproductive questionnaire. If the questionnaire is reproduced on paper of poor quality or poor performance, the respondent will consider the project unimportant and the quality of the response will be affected. And form layout. The format, distance, and position of questions can have a significant effects on the result. Construction of computer and internet questionnaire. Software is available for designing questionnaires that are managed through the internet or other modes such as telephone, personal interview, or letter. This software can automatically perform various tasks such as personalization, join in, randomized selection the answer, consistency check, and add a new response category as the interview progresses. In addition, this software program has various features that facilitate the creation of questionnaires. There are a list of questions, library of questions, appearance of the questionnaire, preview, publish, and notification. Observational forms. Forms are for recording observation data are easier to construct than questionnaires. International marketing research. The questionnaire or research instrument must be adapted to a particular cultural environment and must not be biased in any cultural terms. The information needed must be clearly defined. Ethics in marketing research. Some ethical issues related to the researcher-respondent relationship and the researcher-client relationship may need to be addressed in questionnaire.
And I want to presentation about technique sampling and sampling type. And the first, technique sampling. Technique type part of the statistical method is important because it looks at how representative sampling is taken. And the next is sampling type. Sampling type, broadly speaking, the method of sampling can be divided into two parts. And the first is random sample selection from the population. That is, each member of the population has the same opportunity to be chosen as a sample. And the second, the selection of sample from the population is not random. That is, each member of the population has no chance unless selected or already set as a sample. Sample selection is not done subjectively in the sense that it's not based solely on the desires of the research, so that each member of the population has a certain opportunity to be selected as a sample. In a random sampling, we know each element of the population.
Probability sampling, random samples, systematic samples, stratified samples, and cluster samples. Simple random sampling. Each element that receives the same opportunity to be selected is sampled. Systematic sampling is taking every person into a sample to be taken. Structured sampling, done by taking simple random samples from each predetermined population level. In stratified random sampling, the population is divided into several groups called strata. Cluster sampling, taking several groups from a random population, then taking all or some elements from each selected group to be sampled.
Non-probability sampling. Non-probability sampling or non-random sampling was developed to address the difficulties that arise in applying probability sampling techniques, especially to eliminate cost and problem in making the sampling frame. There are 4 non-probability sampling. The first one is convenience sampling, second one is judgment sampling, third, quota sampling, and fourth, snowball sampling.
Sampling distribution. Sampling distribution is a collection similar statistical values are then arranged in a list so that they are present the relationship between statistical value and statistical frequency. Sampling distribution consists of average sampling distribution, proportional sampling distribution, average difference sampling distribution, and proportional difference sampling distribution.
Question and answer part 5. Number 1. Survey of the production of serial results as shown below. Using 19 and 1819 as the base year, calculate A. Price index with the formulation of last period and past day. B. An index of the amount of production with the formulation of last period and past day. Answer A. Last period's price index is 108.74%. Past day price index is 108.27%. B. Last period's quantity index or LQ is 112.66%. Past day quantity index is 112.17%. Number 2. In 1997, the Delta Company needed 1 hour of labor to make 1 valve unit, 0.5 hours of labor per unit of pipe, and 2 hours of labor per unit of pump. In 1999, the Delta Company needed 500,000 hours of labor to produce 120,000 valves, 80,000 pipes, and 200,000 pumps. Calculate labor productivity in 1999 at the Delta Company using 1997 as the base year. Answer: valve 120 hours, pipes 80,000 hours, and pumps 400,000 hours. The number of labor hours is 120 hours plus 80,000 hours plus 400,000 hours is 560,000 hours labor, and the productivity index is 112%, increase in productivity between 1997 and 1999 by 12%. Number 3. Give an example application using the relative index numbers in everyday life. Answer: the relative index numbers entered into the index are not weak and weak. A relative index that cannot be weak can present the effect of change in quantita in units used as a basic for calculating index numbers. For example, the price index of consumer goods, which is a guideline for regulating workers' salaries or adjusting workers' salaries during periods of inflation.
4. Give an example of aggregative index in daily life. Index numbers include price, quantity, and value index. An example of its use is in calculating the price index of certain food commodity over a certain period of time. Number 5. The following is data of Cisadane Rice in 1999. Determine the relative price index of commodity with 1995 as the basis. We use relative price index formula. The formula is calculated year price divided by base year price multiplied by 100. The result is on 1995 relative index shows 100. On 1996, relative index shows 103. On 1997, relative index shows 109. On 1998, relative index shows 141. On 1999, relative index shows 168. I will show you how to use SPSS software to analyze data. This tutorial explains the basic ways of entering data and processing data with SPSS. The first thing we should do is input data on Microsoft Excel based on questionnaire or your research instrument. I just make my own data on Microsoft Excel. This is all of my research data. After finish with input data on Microsoft Excel, go to SPSS software to copy-paste the data and begin to analyze data. This is the first look of SPSS software. There are two windows on SPSS. It's data view and variable view. Next is create variable on variable view on your bottom left your windows. I just finished create my own research variables. Now go to data view to copy paste data that we created before on Microsoft Excel. Now we start to analyze univariate from data. Step is go to analyze and then descriptive research and frequencies. Next, I will analyze bivariate of data. The purpose of bivariate is analysis to describe data distribution. The step to analyze bivariate is go to analyze, then descriptive research, and click cross tabs. Enter X variable to column. Choose the chi-square test. The next is validity analysis. The step of validity is to analyze, correlate, and bivariate. Enter the X variable that will we test. Next is reliability analysis. Its purpose is to make sure your research instrument reliable to your research. We use Cron-Alpha formulas. The step is go to analyze, scale, then reliability analysis. We've done with analyze data. All of your research results is printed to output windows. Here is your information needed to step forward your research. Thank you.